get started, I'll have you all introduce yourself. What is your company? What do you do?
All right, my name is Mac Wilkinson. I am the CEO and founder of Moolathon. Moolathon is a social fundraising platform and fitness tracker. It helps groups and individuals and organizations raise money through fitness.
All right, my name is Rafi Kayat and I'm the CEO of Panelist. Panelist makes business payments simple, transparent, affordable. We simplify cross-border payments for anyone.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Bledsoe. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Paper, and Paper is a digital calendar analytics app that connects directly to your calendar so you can see exactly how and where you're spending your time.
Awesome. And I'm Kiana Baker, Director of Community Engagement for Amplify Louisville. So we're going to hop right on into it. What does failure mean to you?
Me first?
Yeah.
Anyone?
I actually personally am not a huge fan of the word failure when it comes to entrepreneurship. I think that there's no such thing really. I think that, we live in a world of pivots. You learn, we live in a world of lessons. So you take, I think, everything that you do, whether it's a success or whether you call it a so-called failure, it helps you on your next journey. So I personally don't like it. I think it's a dirty word when it comes to entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think, ever since we were kids, we were taught by our parents, oh, don't fail, don't fail at this, don't fail your test, don't fail, in the sport, don't do this. When really you're meant to, you're meant to try it out, you're meant to fail at it, which is essentially not doing it right the first time. That's really what failure is. So I think, if we wire our brain a little bit differently, teach our kids it's okay to try, it's okay to not have it right from the first time, and it's okay to keep trying. That's the most important until you get it right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I really hate the word failure just because it has such a negative connotation to it. And anytime, especially in my professional life, when I felt like I was failing, I can look back on that now and see how that was actually really beneficial to me. And it sucked when I was going through it, but I grew so much from that. And I think, like Rafi said, the only way to really fail is to just not try at all, because you're always going to learn something through that, even if it doesn't work out. And most times it won't work out the way you expect it to.
Mm-hmm. So failure is essentially inevitable.
Yeah.
There's no getting around it. I heard someone once call it falling forward, which I thought was awesome.
Yes.
Because it does push you towards something, even if you don't know what that is yet.
Mm-hmm.
So as a founder, failing is inevitable. What was your first encounter with failing as a founder?
Well, I would say, I hate using the word failure, but I would say almost everything leading up to now. I've had plenty of wins, and I've had, plenty of so-called lessons, as I would like to call them. But everything has led up to this point. I can think of so many businesses that I've been involved with in the past that have helped Moolathon and have aided Moolathon in so many different ways, whether it be fundraising and that being a part of Moolathon, or whether it being my background as a professional athlete and that being a part of Moolathon. So, I think everything, whether it's good or bad, that it's been a lesson for me, and I think it's all led up to now.
I think, if I were to kind of so-call the first failure, it's, I think, the failure to try. I think there's a lot of people who are afraid, and the first, lesson that they learn is not to be afraid, and it comes in different phases and different times for people. So whenever that comes to you, just go for it.
And can I just add one thing to what you just said too? Is I think that's probably the first, if there is a failure, that's probably the only way to define it, is not trying at all, the zero effort. Because I think so many people talk themselves out of a good idea, talk themselves out of executing, and that's what separates like entrepreneurs from just everyone else who has ideas, is people who actually execute. So yeah, sorry.
No, I actually have like a pretty specific instance of failure. I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur, and I've had multiple businesses, multiple that failed and some that succeeded, but I just didn't like anymore. So I had one of my first though it was a social media management company, and I worked really hard at that business, and I kind of split away. So my husband and I owned an IT services company, and I kind of bundled it all under that for a long time. I grew it to the point where it really needed to be its own company. So I broke it away, formed its own LLC, went out, got more clients, did that for a year, and I literally woke up one morning and I was like, I hate this. Like, I am miserable every day. I did not sign up to be an entrepreneur to still hate my job. And I struggled with that for so long, because that to me, like, the narrative that I kept playing was like, you're a failure if you shut this down. Like, it's going to, you're going to fail. Like, and I finally just got to the point where I was like, I can't, like, I physically react when I think about managing someone's Pinterest today. And so I finally got to the point where I was like, I'm done. And so I sent all my clients an email. I gave them their 30-day notice that I was terminating their contracts and that I wasn't going to do this anymore. And so many of them tried to talk me out of it. And I was just like, I just can't do it. And so it took me quite a while to get to the point where I finally said, I'm not going to do this anymore. But when I tell you, the very next day, like after those contracts were done, like I was a brand new person. Like I was just so inspired to like, okay, this is what I don't want to do. So what is it that I do want to do? And my other business thrived because of that. And so it really weighed on me, because it felt like a failure. And it was the first time that I'd really ever experienced something like that, especially where it was totally in my control to either do it or not do it. And so that for me, I think that's the one I kind of bookmark, is like, I thought this was a huge failure, but I am so grateful that I did not do that for any longer than I absolutely had to.
Sounds empowering though.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I can relate to that, Jessica. So first and foremost, the reason why I like to call it failure is because, I don't know if you know this about me or not, but I really enjoy taking words and conversations that are deemed taboo in American society and transitioning our mindsets to like thinking of it as not so much of a bad thing, right? Like, let's call it failure. I failed, right? I do this a lot. So, failure.
Yeah.
It's like the
I
word,
failed today.
yes, it's like no. It's like the word no, right? It's like once you say like no, absolutely not. So I definitely can relate to you, Jessica, because during the pandemic, I started a business accidentally. But once you're in this world, you just kind of get bit by the bug, and everything's a business.
Yep.
You're like, oh, this could be a business.
Yep.
But recently, over the last month, I didn't dissolve it, but I took the website down. And it was such a hard thing for me to do. But like you, I started this business as a way to manage my anxiety during the pandemic when we went on lockdown. And so I thrived during that time, because like I was sad and I was depressed, and the whole business was centered around like taking that feeling, putting it into something creative, and presenting it to the world like, hey y'all, we are all sad together.
Right.
Let's just call a thing when we say, how are you doing? Quit saying good, because we're not. And so, like literally, that was the entire basis of it. It was like t-shirts and sweatshirts and tie-dye, and all the shirts had these sayings on it like, I am not okay, like all these things, right? But now, the place that I'm in, I'm like, I can only do my business when I'm sad, and who wants to constantly be in that state? So people would ask for things, and I'm like, I don't have it.
Right.
I don't have it, y'all.
Right.
Like, you gonna have to wait until like, I don't know, I get my heart broken or something. I don't know. So I don't want to dissolve it, because I know that eventually I'll be sad again or anxious or whatever. But it felt like such a failure. I'm like, what do I tell people? Oh my goodness, like, how am I supposed to explain this? But I'm so glad that I just don't have it on my back anymore. So I definitely can relate. So has there ever been a time that failure affected you negatively as a founder? Like, yes, it's great to think like, oh, we take it and we use it for good, but has it ever affected you as far as like causing you not to start something, or, anything like that?
I think like my failures, while you're going through them, it obviously affects you. It definitely had an effect on like my mental health, and there are days where I can remember I've told this story before, like just driving down Eastern Parkway and just like sobbing because I'm just like, this is so hard, and like I don't know how I'm gonna get out of it, and I don't know like what to do from here. And like when I'm going through it, like it's really difficult, but I honestly can look back at it and completely understand why each of those things happen. I think if anything, I'm really big into like manifesting, and for me, that like my ego is always kind of bringing me back to that place of like, well, what if this happens again, and that, you know, that's like my worst case scenario is like, well, what if you fail again, and what if this happens? So my ego brings me back to that place, but through my like mindset work, I know that that's my ego, and I know that it's just trying to keep me safe, but I'm safe to move forward. And it took me a long time to learn those things and learn how to train myself to recognize when I'm being pulled back because of an experience that I've had. I've experienced it, so I know what it's like, but I also know how to get through it because I've gotten through it every time. So I think that when you're going through it, you'll have a negative experience, but hopefully you can draw on that as a positive experience, and it just keep pushing through it. Like you're gonna get through it eventually, one way or the other. So come out, you know, on the other side of that.
That's key what she said about keeping pushing. Like, I think as general, entrepreneurs are extremely positive people by nature. They just have to be, because there's failure. There's two kinds of failure. There's the macro and the micro. On the micro level, there's failures every day. I mean, I'm on the phone with people that, you know, that I'm trying to convince to use the platform. Some of them get it, some of them don't. You know, and the ones that don't, you know, I'm trying to convince people to give us money, to get funded. You know, I'm trying to do things all the time. There's small wins and small losses within every day. But you got to focus on the wins, and you got to keep pushing, and you got to think that, you know, every one of those losses is going to inevitably help me get to the bigger win. So, yeah, I do think that, you know, without question, I think, you know, it's easy to let those things affect you, and people, you know, will get affected inevitably. But as a group, I think, you know, the most persistent of us are the entrepreneurs who, you know, can push through those things. So.
Yeah, I think you wouldn't be human if it doesn't affect you negatively.
Yeah.
You know, you have to admit that to yourself, just for your own sanity. I think maybe the entrepreneur, you know, community doesn't highlight that as much. So all you see is people's successes.
Right.
And so when you look internally, you're like, well, man, I'm not succeeding, you know, I'm failing, you know, so what's wrong with me? You know, why isn't my business working? Why isn't, you know, what I'm doing right? And I think, you know, deep down though, if you unveil the curtains of everyone else, they're actually going through the same thing you are, but no one talks about that, right? And so you just gotta, you know, either rely on yourself to get through it, really have the grit to say, you know what, today was a bad day, tomorrow is going to be a good one. Just for example, just yesterday, we hired someone, and you know, we were very excited. You know, it was their first week, and then we realized that even though our interview process was rigorous, we realized that actually this person could work and promote, has another job. And so you always have these people, and it's like, well, what did I do wrong? You know, how I wasted resources, I wasted time, I wasted energy, and so it's like you'll always fail, no matter what kind of things you have in place to prevent that. So you just gotta keep on moving, you know, dust it off, and be like, okay, what's next?
So you bring up a good point, because, you know, and it's also one of the reasons why I'm very big on doing things like this, because in entrepreneurship, we always highlight the wins, right? I mean, that's our hashtag, celebrate the wins.
Yeah.
But in reality, being an entrepreneur is hard. It is so hard. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of emotional roller coasters. I was just telling a friend the other day, because now that I work in this entrepreneur space and I'm a founder, my friends think I know it all. And I'm like, y'all, really, I have no clue what I'm doing. I'm just doing it every day and figuring it out along the way. But they wanted to start a business, and they mentioned, like, you know, I'm just taking my time because I don't want to fail. And I said, oh, well, then you may not want to start a business at all, because you're probably going to fail in the first week. It's fine. You'll just have to constantly start over, right? And so you all talked about pushing through. And while we all push through, is there ever a time that you should just give up? Why or why not?
I mean, possibly, but I don't think any of us are in the position to just give up.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine once you get to a certain level and there's investor dollars on the line and there's, customers that are already using the platform or whatever, I mean, giving up is just, I don't even want to think about it. It's just so far out of my mindset. So, yeah, that's just my personal standpoint.
I don't know, right? Because you can, what does giving up mean, right? It's like another chapter of your life. You have to think of it that way. It's your own personal journey. Maybe this chapter has ended and there's another chapter for you down the line. I can tell you that because, I've had multiple startups, so, so giving up for whatever that reason may be has to be very convincing, and you have to be very strong to do that. Actually, it's really a power, like a position of strength, not a weakness for someone to say, hey, enough is enough, I want to put me first. I want to put my mental health first. I want to put my life first, and it doesn't matter what the community thinks. It doesn't matter what my investors, my customer thinks. If they really care and about me and what I'm doing in the mission and the vision, they'll support me in this. They'll know that in my next chapter, I'll be able to deliver even something better.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there is sometimes reasons to give up, and I think that that's not because things are hard or you don't know how you're going to do something or it feels like you're just not going to figure out a way. I think it's something internally where you just know, like, this is not benefiting me. I don't find joy in this. I've tried things to overcome that and it's not working, and I don't think anything is worth, suffering your mental health for. And if you think that you need to change something, then you probably do, but it could also just be a pivot. It could just be pivoting your business in a way that serves you better than the way that it's serving me now. And I think that that's something, like, we get in our minds of, like, this is my business, this is what my business does, this is who my business serves, this is how I'm going to sell my business, and maybe that's not the best way. I think we all learned from the pandemic is, like, pivot, but knowing that you can pivot, and it's okay to let something go that's not serving you, whether that's a service or a part of your business, or to hire someone else to just do that part of the business if it's not something that you enjoy. But, like, don't let that be your first go-to is to give up. But if you've tried things and you're really just unhappy, then there's literally no shame in just saying, I'm not going to do this anymore.
Yeah, don't give up.
I love that. So we talk a lot about pivoting, which I feel like as entrepreneurs, you're in constant pivot mode. So, this whole pivoting during the pandemic, while it was kind of shocking, it was like, oh yeah, I do this all the time, right? So when it comes to pivoting, which is a form of regrouping, can you talk to us about, like, what does regrouping look like for you? What does that process look like for you as a founder when you need to pivot?
Well, I think there's several different levels of a pivot. There's an about face pivot, which is like a complete, now we're doing a whole different business. But I think you make small adjustments and pivots, especially for all of us in technology. We're listening to the customers at all times. We're constantly evolving the platform. We're constantly listening. Okay, what are we doing that's not right? And I think that's a huge part, is those minor adjustments and those minor pivots. That's a huge part of being an entrepreneur, is listening to your customer, understanding what you're really good at and what you're not so good at, and making those adjustments along the way. So I think pivoting is essential, like, it's necessary. Now, I don't agree with about face pivots, like, last week you were doing this and now this week you're doing that. I don't agree with that. But along the way, 100%, you should be making fine-tuned adjustments the whole way.
Yeah, I think as, especially as startup founders, like, when we started our business, we had this idea of what the business was going to be. And you start it, and then, you're doing your market research, and you find through that, like, for me, it was very eye-opening. Like, there were so many things that I hadn't considered, and so many industries that I hadn't considered that it would be able to serve, and listening to them and taking that feedback in. And sometimes that meant building something that I either didn't even know we needed, or doing it in a way that I hadn't necessarily planned on. But listening to that feedback and kind of letting it guide you in a way and not being like so stuck in your own mind of like, no, this is what I'm building, because then you're just kind of building it for yourself. You're not building it for the customer. It's going to be difficult to grow, and you had an idea, and that's great, but is that idea actually going to be able to serve the purpose that you mean it to serve? And listening to feedback and understanding too that like feedback is just that. It's just feedback. You ultimately get to decide what you do with that feedback, and it can be positive and it can be negative, but you're the one that's kind of in control of driving that and deciding how you're going to pivot. But you need to be constantly in that mindset of like knowing that you need to make those kind of small shifts. And then if something like the pandemic happens, sometimes it is a hard left turn because you're faced with a really big challenge and you have to kind of pivot to stay alive. And hopefully we don't experience too many of those, but when you do, like it's just one of those things where you're like, okay, well this is just where we're at and what we have to do, so we're gonna figure out a way to make it work. Like that's my tagline, is just figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I didn't mean to cut off Rafi, but that's a good point too, is that sometimes you can't control like when you need to pivot. Like, the pandemic showed us all that we all need to adjust, and we all need to, I don't care how well suited your business was for the pandemic, everyone needed to make small adjustments. I didn't mean to cut that off, but I wasn't thinking about that when she said that, but there are some situations that are out of your control in which you have to make those adjustments.
Yeah, I'll keep it short here. I echo what they said, but really a pivot is when something doesn't work, something is stuck, you feel like you try it, and it's not getting anywhere, and then you try something new, and you're like, actually, I just got a little bit farther than what I did here. And you're like, okay, well, let me keep trying this. And then suddenly that works, and that could be at the micro level, and a couple of micro then becomes a macro. And so it's just about adapting and listening to the market, and that's just all part of the entrepreneur journey.
I love that the word adapting is so powerful, because I feel like just in life you have to constantly be adapting, right? And so for me as a founder, one of the things that I wish I had done differently was honestly just doing what I wanted to do and what I felt like was right, as opposed to worrying about what I felt like was expected of me. So as a founder, what do you wish you had done differently in the beginning, or when it comes to a time that you had failed?
That's hard, because there are so many instances where I could have done this differently, but I don't regret necessarily the decisions that were made or the way things have happened, because again, I've learned from that. And I know that's so kind of cliche to be like, oh, I've learned from all of my mistakes, but I feel like you do, you learn so much through them. I mean, I think if anything, Kiana, I would agree that there have definitely been times where I've done things because I felt like that's what I was supposed to be doing. And it's even something that I struggle with now as a first-time startup founder, where I am raising money, and I feel like there's this roadmap that I'm supposed to follow, and there are things that I'm supposed to say, and even things ways that I'm supposed to present myself that don't always feel super authentic to me. And I've been working through that with my mentor recently, where I'm like, this is what I want to say, and he's like, well, why don't you just say that? And I'm like, I don't know how they're going to respond to that. And it's finding that confidence for me, just to be like, this is who I am. I know what I bring to the table. I know that I am going to figure it out beyond all else. That's if you take nothing else away from this meeting, just know that. But it's difficult, because especially as a female founder too, you're always just a little bit on had they already dismissed me before I even walked into the room? So it's difficult to navigate that, and I wish I could be completely authentic to myself 100% of the time. Something that I think you're just always aware of and try to be better at each time you enter a room.
That question, it's you don't know it until it happens, and you don't know it at the time, and it's kind of like thinking about the alternative path. Well, what if this? I personally don't bog myself with that, because I can say what if on a million things. What if it's greener on this side? What if I raised money then? What if I didn't raise money then? And it's well, you never know. Even if that was the right move at that time, that move has ripple effects that comes with newer problems, newer things that you'll never know what that caused. So I think it's a little bit tough to answer that question.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with both of them, especially like when you're in it. I think if there's one thing to take from this conversation is like you said earlier, like taking those words that have somewhat of a negative connotation and sort of reframing them. And I think if there's one thing that you take from this, it's like how to reframe failure. Just because I think that, there's not that one moment that, that causes regret in my mind. I think that all of those moments have led to this moment, and any small so-called failures, or what an outside person might call as a failure, will ultimately lead me to my end goal. Again, a loss is not a loss, it's a lesson. So, yeah, I don't personally, and I don't think people, it's hard for us to view them like that, like small failures. I just don't think that entrepreneurs in the thick of things view it like that unless they're looking back on it. But I'm grateful for any failures or any mistakes. I do think sometimes, like he said, like, what if I would have raised money then, or should I make this decision now, or anything like that. But I feel like that's every day of your life as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, you can spend your entire day, week, or month just thinking through those scenarios, and it's not, you can't change it. So there's really nothing you can do about it other than to continue to move it forward, and maybe think about it before you do it again. But it's so hard to regret something that's already happened when you know you're ultimately going to learn a lesson from that.
So as entrepreneurs, we're all students of life, right? We're constantly learning. We're constantly, by the time you get here, there's something new that's come out that you have to learn, and you have to pivot, and you have to implement. And so I think that plays a role in us being like, you know what, failure happens all the time, so I might as well just get comfortable with it and learn how to navigate life, embracing it, as opposed to rejecting it or letting it make me fearful. So how do you use failure to your advantage?
Well, I think one of the themes that we've talked about, the thing that's kept coming up, is that it's inevitable, right? It's gonna happen, and I think again, it's just adapting. That's the key. If it's gonna happen, and it's gonna happen, on the micro scale, like I said, every day, whether it's trying to get someone to use the platform and they just don't get it, or whether it's something like that, you've got to be able to pivot. In that particular instance, I might ask myself, what am I doing wrong that's not communicating this well to that customer? How can I change? How can I make it that much more better? How can I refine it that much more?
I think that if anything, just being so open about failure is just a benefit to knowing that I'm aware that this might happen, knowing that I know how to pivot through things, knowing that I've never given up through one of those failures. Like, I think that just shows character and shows growth and shows, especially to an investor, that hey, I know that failure is inevitable. I know that this is going to happen. I know that this is my idea for my business right now. These are my financial projections for right now. But failure is going to happen. But I'm going to know what to do when that happens, because I've experienced before. I've come out on the other side of it, and I know that that's not the end. That's just a new beginning, essentially. So I think that if you've never failed before, then you've never done anything before.
Right.
And that's scarier, I think, than failure, is that unknown of are they going to be able to fail? How are they going to take that no after no after no after no after no? And I think if you can show that, look at all these failures that I've had, you're all right, you're still standing upright. You're still here, you're still doing it. So let's
getting through that failure can definitely give you that element of confidence too, as well. I've been through this before. So.
Yeah, I think people experience failure in different ways, and it just builds up their character, right? I think that's, and people just learn from it, different experiences. That builds confidence, it builds grit, it builds so many things that you as a person can improve. And I think that's one of the best benefits of failing, is that you just grow, you keep growing as a person.
Yeah. So back to what we were saying earlier, don't quit.
Yeah.
Keep growing.
Yeah, honestly, for me, failing is one of my favorite things, because it's almost essential to your success. You can't know what you're doing wrong if you don't fail. And why would I want to keep going in the wrong direction when I can just go over a little bump that takes me into the right direction? You know what I mean? So in the title, of this chat, failing to launch and launching to fail, what they don't tell you about becoming a founder, I'm posing you the question, what did they not tell you about becoming a founder? What is like the number one thing that you're like, ooh, nobody told me about this part?
Oh man, it is one of the most difficult journeys you can ever take. You know, it's not glamorous. It's not easy. You are not going to become a billionaire or an Elon Musk. The chances of that happening, you know, is 0.001%, right? It's like super, super slim. So it's knowing those facts, going into it first, that the odds are stacked against you big time. Like, yes, you may have a good business idea. Yes, you're a really good, strong person, founder. But even with all of that, you still might fail. You know, the chances are that you will. So you still want to go about it.
Well, no one told me how important it was to have a really good CPA from the beginning, and I made a lot of really bad tax mistakes because of it. So, first rule of advice: get you a good CPA as soon as you form your business. But then, I mean, like Rafi said, like they can't tell you that because they're not going to have the same experiences that you're going to have. And we can sit up here and we can talk about how hard it is, and it is hard. Like, it is very, very hard, but everything in life is hard, and I would rather do this kind of hard than someone else's kind of hard, because at least I get to decide how hard it's going to be for me, and it's directly benefiting me. Like, there's, you know, that quote, like, if you don't build your dreams, someone else will hire you to build theirs, and that, like, I'm like, you are not going to pay me money to come over there and build your empire. Like, I will die on this hill of mine. But it is hard, but I don't want that to, like, discourage anyone. Like, if you can literally just keep going, that's all you have to do. Like, you just have to show up and keep going. It's hard, but it does get easier. Like, once you recognize that you're going to fail, that first failure is probably the hardest. That's the one that you'll lose the most sleep over. But don't be afraid to start. Don't be afraid to keep going. And don't be afraid of what other people are going to think, because unless they are in your shoes and they're doing the same thing you're doing, then they get no say in how you're doing it. And I think that's the thing that holds people back the most, is like, what is so-and-so going to think, or what is so-and-so going to think? And you can get so lost in that, but unless they are paying your bills and, like, living your life for you, then you have to let that part go, because you're never going to see what's on the other side of that. And instead of thinking, like, well, what if I fail, think about what if I succeed. And that's what, like, when I make a decision, I'm like, well, what if this actually works, you know, instead of what if it doesn't, because that's always in the back of your mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the one thing that I was probably never told, or that most entrepreneurs are never told, is staying on theme, how essential failure is. And I do think that one day this industry, whether it be tech or this whole startup ecosystem, we will redefine that whole idea of failure is essential. Just a better way to phrase it, because I think some people hear it and they understand, okay, there's a way to learn, there's a way to do this. And I think other people hear it and they think, oh, well, you know, that just means the odds are stacked against me and all this, which they are, don't get it. They are stacked against you, absolutely. But I really would like to find a way to redefine the way people view failure in our community, in the startup ecosystem, in every startup ecosystem. Just because I think that, you know, again, those failures, they're small adjustments that you have to make along the way. And I think that those are essential to just keep barely adjusting the dials along the way. And I think that's probably the one thing that I wasn't told, is just how essential it is to fail, and how essential it is to have a strong mind and to have resilience and to keep pushing. So.
Well, I'll share what no one told me, because I'm a new founder. No one told me, but I wish more people did. No one told me that nobody knows what they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh,
that's a good one.
That's a good one.
I mean, every time, like, when I always thought that I couldn't start something, so I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I should probably, like, read more books or go take a class or whatever. Yeah. And then I go ask someone, and they're like, I don't really know, but I'm going to figure it out for you, and I will let you know. And I'm like, oh, so nobody, we're just all just kind of out here, like, here's a problem, and figure out the solution, and then you figure it out, and then it's like, another problem. I don't know what to do, but I'm gonna figure it out. So like, I wish that more people told me, like, listen, I don't know what I'm doing either, but I'm doing it. Because I think that so many people are deterred from starting out of the fear of failure because they don't know what to do,
Mm-hmm.
not realizing that like no one knew what they were doing,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I really wish that like that was what I was told a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
So we all have a team of people, right? Regardless of if it's a team of people that work with us, if it's a team of people that we contract with, if it's just a team of supporters or resources. So when it comes to failure, who do you lean on, or what resources do you lean on when you need help or a pick-me-up or anything like that? Who and what do you lean on? Like if you could give our listeners and audience any people or resources that they should make sure they have when it comes to failing to make it not such a hard fall, what would you tell them?
Community.
Yes.
Community is the key. And you know, we're lucky in Kentucky, you know, being in a space like this in Story. You know, Kentucky's you know, Louisville's a decent sized city, but we're small enough to where everyone is very accessible. I can call Jen and you know, someone that I know that she may know within 2 degrees of separation. It's pretty easy to get a hold of people, and it's pretty easy to communicate up the ladder. But anytime that there's issues or ideas that I have or things to execute, it's always the community that I tend to lean on, and you know, that's the one thing that I'm thankful about being in a smaller ecosystem is accessibility to different people.
I think, you know, looking at a more internal circle than a community, it has to be, you know, probably your co-founder. Your co-founder is in it with you in the trenches doing the fight that you're doing. He's gonna have failures, you're gonna have failures, and you need to kind of always pick yourself up, you know, kind of think of it as like, you know, it's best when you're in a battle with someone by your side covering your back. And that's kind of what co-founders are for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yes to both of those things. I think community has been incredibly important to me. Louisville is really great in that I've never asked anyone for help that they haven't been willing to give me. Sometimes that's I'm sorry, I don't have what you're looking for, but here's somebody who might. Like, there's always someone who's kind of willing to help. My co-founder is my husband, and that works because we have 2 completely different lanes, but we've been very fortunate in that when like he's struggling, I'm not, and when I'm struggling, he's not, so we can kind of keep each other moving, and I have full faith in him and his abilities, and he has full faith in me and my abilities, so we can kind of push each other through that. But I've also been very fortunate to have a group of women who are also entrepreneurs that I can lean on, and who are always like willing to kind of give me that pep talk of like, you are not screwing this up, like look at all these amazing things that you've done, and like they're always there to be kind of my cheerleaders, or just to open a bottle of wine with me if that's what we need to do. But I think it's really important to have a circle of people who you can rely on, because it can be really lonely as an entrepreneur. Even when you have friends and family, if they're not also entrepreneurs, they just don't always understand what you're going through, and they can support you and be there for you, but those people are going to be ones who actually know what you're going through and can help you and can get you through that and get you out of the weeds. Like, you get in it and you're like, I don't see a way out of it, and they're like, here's the door over here. So that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and I love that you said, you know, your friends who are like, no, you're doing fine, because I think as entrepreneurs, it's because we're always in the trenches and we're focused on the next thing. Okay, I hit this mark, now I need to go here. I hit this mark, now I need to go here. Sometimes it's nice to have someone who's like, okay, but wait a minute, did you really acknowledge that you just raised $1 million? Like, let's take a minute to like acknowledge it, celebrate yourself, or even if it's just you made it through this year and you are still here. Like, sometimes it's nice to have those people to give you those hard stops, because we're always on the go and grinding. So we talked about community. How would one, like myself, right? I don't come from an entrepreneurial background. I'm new into this industry as a whole. How would someone who does not have that, or even have a person to tap into, go about starting to build their community?
I think Story is actually a wonderful place to start building your community, because there's always people here. They're kind of here doing the same thing you are. There's always so many events that are here. Networking has been a huge way for me to grow that community. Almost everyone that's in that circle that I mentioned of women, I met them through networking, and then they may have introduced me to someone else. I've formed a mastermind with them, and then we ended up starting our own separate business. Like, you know, like you meet so many people, and I think networking is the best way to do that. And I have horrible social anxiety. Like, walking into a room where I don't know if I'm gonna know anyone or not is really difficult for me. And I know that a lot of people are suffering through that, especially when we've been quarantined for almost 2 years and we've barely left our house. Like, I know it can be difficult to do that for the first few times, but I would absolutely encourage you to just get out and network, attend events, walk up to somebody you don't know and say hello. And I think that you get in that routine. Like, it's actually a pretty small town out here. You're gonna see the same people kind of over and over again, and you're gonna get to know each other and just have coffee with someone. Like, just make yourself available.
Yeah, I think events is a really big one. There's so many that throw them, you know, Story, Amplify, you know, so many others. Get to know, you know, Lisa. Lisa is the number one person. She'll connect you with anyone. Larry Horn, you know, from Amplify also. So get to know people who are already in the community, and everyone is actually very open to help you out. And you know, if you are at a stage where you have a startup and you know you want to get into an incubator or accelerator, the community has a lot, and those are really good community enablers, right? You know, that's how I met Max, how I met Jessica. You know, we in those programs, you're just bound to meet people.
And they're in those programs, you're bound to meet people and people that are going to help you as well, mentors and coaches and things like that as well. Again, we're in Louisville. So I can probably, if you just hang out at Quills every day or come to Story, you'll meet everybody in this community. So it's like, you know, it's, again, that's one of the beauties of being in Louisville, is it's not hard to get immersed into this network. So yeah, just Quills or Story.
So to put this in list form for those who might watch later, you should join a co-working space, go to events. And just an FYI, if you're looking for events, there's so many great newsletters. Like, I am subscribed to every newsletter. GLI, Louisville Business First, Amplify Louisville, Story Louisville. I mean, there's just Venture Connectors, and they list events.
I just signed up for a new one. I can't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, they list so many different events. What else did you all say? Oh, hang out in Nulu.
Yeah. Nulu's becoming the little tech hub. Yeah.
And make sure that you know Larry Horn and Lisa would join us.
Yes.
All right. So that's all we need. That is all we need.
Give you a shout out.
Yeah. And I would say work LinkedIn too, because everybody's on LinkedIn, to be honest, regardless of if you use it or not. But at least you can like see, if I know that this person is pretty well connected in a community that I want to be in, let me like follow other people that they follow, because they're probably tapped in too. So, you know, I'm still learning the whole LinkedIn thing. But
I get super spammed in LinkedIn.
Yeah, same. I would actually
I'm
love to
like-
get a message on LinkedIn that isn't like a 4-page long text
Yes,
about some
yes,
service.
yes,
If they're
yes.
just like, hey Jessica, saw you on Amplify today, what's
I
up?
get anxiety every time I log on to LinkedIn.
yeah, it's a lot. I just started trying to tap in, but I mean, it can be a great way to build your
It is,
network and just
100%.
know who's out there in the world. So there's your list of how to build your community. But to round out this conversation, what advice would you give other founders about failure?
I would just say, just me personally, change your perspective on failure. And I really wish that we're using that word for lack of a better term. But, again, a loss is not a loss, it's a lesson. Just make those little adjustments, keep fine tuning. You're gonna have micro levels of failure. You might even have a macro level of failure. But you just gotta keep pushing, don't quit.
Yeah, if you take a look at all the successful people that you see successful, you know, whoever your idol is, 99.9% you'll see that they all have the same attribute, which is grit. Well, what is grit? It's really the ability to keep going even though you've experienced failure. And so if you just have that mindset in mind, have that grit, eventually you'll be successful.
Yeah, I would just echo those same things. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to start. There's no successful person that hasn't had a ton of failures, and anytime I've been going through one of those big failures, that's always been the thing, is like, this is going to be part of my story. You know, like this is going to make a great chapter in my book. Like that's going to be awesome. And that's how I try to just reframe it. So don't be afraid to fail. It's completely inevitable. You're going to fail in life either way. You're never going to not have failures in life. So again, let it be your own failure instead of someone else's failure.
And lastly, what keeps you pushing through when things get hard, when you're constantly failing? Sometimes we hit seasons of failure. What keeps you going when you don't want to?
Well, I think the first thing is when you start a business, hopefully you're passionate about it. So passion is number one. And for me, this is a more personal thing than other things. It's my son. I have a 6-year-old son. So it's like seeing the joy in him, his innocence and the youthfulness. It's like all the other BS, all the other, little setbacks or failures that I had that day, being able to, see his innocence and his joy for the world, makes me excited about what I'm doing and those things. So.
Yeah, I think, your why. Why are you doing this? You gotta ask yourself that before you start any business. Because no matter what happens, you're gonna always resort to that why. And at the most difficult times of, your journey, you're gonna ask yourself that question. Well, why am I even doing this? Why am I even here? and if you have a really good answer to that question, then you'll keep going.
Yeah, I think that even my really bad days are still pretty decent days in the grand scheme of things, and I get to wake up and do something that I genuinely enjoy doing every day, even if every day isn't great. And I know that I'm going to succeed. Failure really isn't an option in the grand scheme of my life. I know that I'm going to succeed, so I know that all I have to do is just push through one more day, and this is the life that I want, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to be able to continue that. And that's my why. And so, like Robbie said, just know your why and make sure your mindset is really strong. But if you can do those two things, then there's no way not to fail, honestly.
Yes. Well, thank you all so much for sharing. I mean, failure can be a little personal, and no one wants to share those parts of life. It's nice to be able to skim through and be like, look, y'all, I made it. But thank you for sharing that and encouraging other people to keep going when things get hard. Please make sure you support Mulathon and Borderless and Paver. So thank you all, and thank you